Well, hello, lovely listeners. Welcome, viewers. Today, we have the wonderful Graham Moore. Graham has dedicated over 30 years to researching and studying the English Constitution. He has unique insights into its history, principles, and the relevance today. And as a layperson and registered paralegal, Graham occasionally sits as a Mackenzie friend and provides support in constitutional cases, assisting members of the English Constitution Society who have maybe been arrested, charged, or need legal guidance. And unlike groups such as the Freemen of the Land, which Graham passionately believes to be an organised government psyop, interesting, the ECS focuses on educating the public about the true law and constitution of England, tracing its origins and significance. And your mission, Graham, includes clarifying key historical contributions of the English people, such as the abolition of slavery, which you say is achieved by the English, not the British. I think slavery is still in existence. You probably agree with that, but I know what you're referring to. And through your work, you've challenged misconceptions about the difference between being English and British, emphasizing the distinct identities and histories of each and referencing the constitutional case of Calvin 1608, where Sir Edward Coke made it clear with a common law system, you do not need a political union. And yeah, join Graham Moore as he explores the Constitution's power to restore justice, freedom, championing the rallying cry, the Constitution is the solution. Welcome, Graham. It's amazing to have you. Thank you so much. I know you're very busy.
Thank you very much. Yes, I am busy dealing with the authorities who are always trying to distract us and get in our way of the or between us and the electorate, which is basically what they do. We are living in Soviet Britain.
Oh, yes, that's for sure. Um, well, thank you for being here. Before we continue, I just need to say my little bit. So, viewers, please keep liking, commenting, sharing, subscribe if you haven't already, because it really helps my channel to grow. And as YouTube won't monetize me, if you are feeling generous, buy me a coffee /Mel Clark with an E. So, Graham, I'd love to know a little bit of your backstory in terms of obviously you've been doing this a long time, but what was life like before you sort of got into this? Were you ever a normie, or you one of these people that always question things? And what got you into it? And any sort of little pivotal moments you can share with us.
Well, there's a number of things I'll say to you. So, first thing I'll say to you and your audience is thank you for inviting me on. One of the things I'll say is I love the name of your show, which is never settle. Well, that's part of my principle in life, right? So if the state is doing something that it shouldn't be, you should never allow it. You should never settle for injustice,
Yeah.
for the state oppressing or suppressing you, because our ancestors fought and died for the rights that we own, that are our inheritance, right? So never settle, never stop, always keep pushing forward to take it all back. But um, the briefest history of this is, where did I come from? Why did I start doing it? Well, roughly 30 years ago, I was sent to prison for something that was a complete and utter lie from start to finish, right? Um, I got completely set up by the police, where a police informer was actually the principal in the conspiracy. Um, and a whole case was presented. The police made us category A, so we couldn't communicate with our legal professionals properly. It also creates an extreme amount of pressure on an individual as a category A prisoner for various reasons, not least of which being banged up 23 hours a day. And not getting access to your legal team in the way that you should. And most people will say, I just want to explain this to people. You're talking about me being escorted to various courts with an armed police escort, front Range Rover, machine guns, and they have got machine guns in the back. rear Range Rover, machine guns, a helicopter, spotting helicopter over and above you, blocking roads off all the way onto the court as if you're terrorists, right?
What
So,
did you do?
well, what they allege that I
What you
did
allege, yeah.
was a fraud, right? So if you can imagine that amount of security is only put there to create guilt in the people's minds that are watching it. So they then put 24-hour armed protection on a jury, 24-hour armed protection on a judge, and it's all part of their game. And then they fed all of the lies to the media, right? Which is one of the reasons I don't like the media at all. The alternative media is going that way, and I'm not talking about channels like yours. There's real alternative media out there. Andy the Gabby Cabby, Sean Atwood, LSB Productions, and many Bannerman. There's
Yeah.
many of them people that are like us. They're real people. They're not media trained and do what the state tell them to do, right?
Yeah.
And them channels are not promoted, by the way. So when you see a channel that's got 1,000 subscribers or 2,000 subscribers, they're the channels you should be watching. Because if they're not being promoted, they're telling you the truth, right? And it's the ones that are promoted and getting 3, 4, 5, 6 million subscribers, they're no threat to the state. And that's why they're drawing people in. So on that, I got persecuted, if you want to call it that, by the police. But instead of turning all my energies against the state and members of the public, like yourself, for example, becoming angry and doing all them things, instead what I did was got the law books out. And where we was being banged up for 23 and a half hours a day, and there's some people out saying this, so what? Well, when you haven't been convicted of any crime, to be locked up 23 and a half hours a day, which by the way is illegal, right? I started to read up on prison law, and there is a whole case history on prison law. There was a particular book out there at the time which was called Prison Law by a solicitor called Simon Crichton. I got that book sent in to me. I started reading law reports. I started reading the Archibalds. I started reading the statutes of England. This is all in the legal libraries of the prison. So my cell become almost like a mini chamber. And then from that, I started to speak to other prisoners, mainly out of the window, and said, listen, there's a process where we can change the way we're being treated here. They, again, category A prisoners are not really made category A prisoners because they're dangerous. It's because they're intelligent, right? And then they started to listen to me and they said, what do you want us to do? I said, I need you to make an application in the morning when they let you out for breakfast, and that every one of us needs a request and complaint form. Now, you always got one or two that say, oh, I ain't getting involved in all that, right? They're the ones who caused the problem, right? Because when we all did that, all of a sudden they had to print out all these forms and they knew something was coming. I then set out the law in why we should be allowed to work, why we should be given exercise, why we should be given access to daylight, right? Because it's a human right. And once we put it all in and everyone copied out what I said and signed it, we all put the applications back in. The next thing you know, the wing governor and the number one governor, don't forget this is the most secure prison in Europe, come in and said, what's going on? And they come and spoke to me. And I said, we're not tolerating this and we're going to do a judicial review of our treatment within your prison because what you're doing is acting unlawfully. And then they said, what do you want? We said, we want access to work. We want access to cleaning jobs on the wing. We want access, like other prisoners, to get out of our cells. We want access to the gym, exercise, and we want access to the exercise yard to get daylight, right? And within a week, we was all out working from 23 hours a day. We was all out working on our own serveries, cleaning the wing, and our wing was one of the most spotless wings in the whole prison. Right, it was absolutely you could eat your dinner off the floor. So that changed things. But what I try and say to people is the same situation there is a mirror of society. The state is blocking your access to your rights by not informing you of what your rights are. And then you've got a number of individuals that know what your constitutional rights are and your common law rights. And that is mainly the English Constitution Society and the English Constitution Party. And what we do is advise people that you do have rights. They are inalienable rights, not like the European Convention on Human Rights, which are qualifiable. These are non-qualifiable. In other words, they're yours. No one can take them off you, right? And they also came from the Convention Parliament. And the Convention, or a series of conventions, but the main Convention Parliament was via the Glorious Revolution of 1688. So once people are empowered to understand what their constitutional rights are coming from a Convention Parliament, all they need to do then is understand that there's two sets of laws, private law and public law, right? It sounds complex, it isn't. Basically, if anyone involved with the state or anyone at all offends against your private rights, right, and that basically comes from the Declaration of Rights, which was the original contract between yourself and the Crown, then you have something called private right injury. In America, if you go against their constitutional rights, you can get it for 10 million easily. In some cases, I believe one case was just under $1 billion, right? It's called private right injury. In this country, they've tried to make you forget about all that. They don't educate you about it. The legal professionals won't tell you about it because they're part of the unionist Marxist system, right? And then there's another set of laws which are known as public law or public rights. That is in effect the Bill of Rights, and it's an injunction against the state offending against any of these rights. So it makes it criminal, right? So for anyone in the state to offend against your Bill of Rights, they are then committing a common law offence, which is contempt of statute or contempt of sovereign. And again, they're perjuring their oaths. If they're police constables, they're perjuring their oaths and they shouldn't be doing it. Unfortunately, every one of them is doing that because the people don't know that all of this exists and it's supposed to be communicated to people. So what we do are constitutional seminars, go around the country. That's if the state doesn't block us or stop us from doing a seminar, which they have done recently, because they don't like the fact that hundreds of people are turning up. We show them what the actual law is. We show them that we have a written constitution, that we have a codified constitution in many instances. So, and again, it's not completely codified. And the reason for that is because it's called a common law constitution. The judges are the ones who can turn up the heat or turn down the heat the way if they need to. So that's the basis of it, and it is just the basis of it. But people need to know that they do have rights and inalienable rights far greater than the European Convention of Human Rights. That's almost a laughable convention. It's absolutely nothing to what the English have as their own inheritance. And if you want to know where the inheritance comes from, again, a number of our constitutional statutes actually say forever in a number of different places. The English Bill of Rights, for example, says forever 3 times and all time to come once. And even A.V. Dicey wrote a second book where he said, if you see that phrase, you cannot change it. Not even Parliament can change it. And the reason is because it's one, a constitutional statute, and two, it came from the Convention Parliament. And with that phrasing, an ordinary Parliament cannot change it because it came from a revolutionary period.
So what's the difference between a convention parliament and an ordinary one?
A convention parliament is something. So I'll give you an example, and it's just one of the reasons why the people are sovereign, and no one else, right? The people are sovereign. the Glorious Revolution, there was no king. The king abdicated. So Lord John Somers and Sir John Holt both stated that to both houses. So there was no king. There was a negotiation with King Billy, or who at the time was the Prince of Orange, and that negotiation, and why it is that the current lineage of kings are there in essence, is because they agreed to a contract with the people, and the people allowed a monarchy to step back in. Otherwise, we would be a republic again, just like we had with Cromwell. So the difference between a convention parliament is when there is a serious issue in the kingdom. 9 out of 10 times it means that there is no king, there is no monarchy. The people and the lords, or who were the king's peers, have to get together and sort the problem out, and therefore it's at a much higher level than an ordinary parliament. An ordinary parliament means the king issues a writ. Well, there was no king. He couldn't issue a writ. So the people created the parliament. It was the people's parliament that created the Glorious Revolution and the Bill of Rights and Declaration. That's the essence of it. It is not difficult to understand. The problem is you should have had all of this communicated to you when you was at school, and the reason you didn't was because in the early 1970s, unlawfully, ultra virus, they took us into the common market, or the European Union, which was against the supremacy clause of the English Bill of Rights. So what they did then was they removed the education of your rights and the supremacy clause and the Convention Parliament from your basic education, whether you just went to a normal comprehensive school. Later on, they removed it from grammar schools, for example. It used to be called civics in grammar schools. And then, even worse, at the same time, they removed it from the bar exams and the solicitor exams. So even your legal professionals don't understand what I'm talking about,
No.
right? And they say Parliament is sovereign. And I say, well, I can prove to you it's not, right? But because they've been brainwashed by the state, and people need to remember, Trotsky, who was a Marxist from the Soviet Union, said, he who controls the media controls the mind.
Yeah.
And once you understand that concept, everything that you've been taught is a lie. Everything, right? And we're living in Soviet Britain. The police are now the Red Guard, right?
Yeah.
The names for these people have changed, but the principle of what they're doing is very, very Soviet, right? So Ofcom is identical, for example, to something in the USSR called Glavlit, and Glavlit controlled all communication. Well, Ofcom do exactly the same.
Right.
The level of censorship that we have now got on all platforms. There's certain things, if I was to say it on this platform, your
Yeah.
channel would
Yeah.
be taken down
Yeah.
instantly. That's why I
Yeah.
don't say things. But
Right.
I do on my own channel on Rumble, but not on yours.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. So thank you for that explanation. To go back to what you were saying about you had the cleanest wing in the prison, and obviously you created that change just by getting people together and getting them to understand what it was that you were doing, what they could do. So then what happened next? How long were you in prison, and did you continue your education to get yourself
Yeah.
out of that situation?
So there was a number of things that happened. Yeah, we carried on. So they give me a choice, and I had a young family, etc. They give me a choice. Um, Carry on pleading not guilty in the way you're doing it, because we could prove that the whole thing from end to end was wrong, right? So basically, what they said was, and if there's anyone out there who knows anything about computers, they said that I hacked the banking encryption and broke banking 128-bit banking encryption in 24 hours in my bedroom with a 186 laptop, right? So a 186 laptop is vastly underpowered compared to an average iPhone, right? So what I'm saying is, and they're telling everyone that he broke encryption, the bank 128 bit encryption. it was complete fallacy and complete, literally from non. It was a complete non-starter. So they said to me, "We're either going to give you 15 years, or you plead guilty." Right? If you plead guilty, we'll give you 3 years. Now, if you've got a young family, you're kept under pressure, high pressure conditions in category A. I pleaded guilty, right? Just to relieve the pressure on everyone and just get it over and done with, right? It's one of the deepest regrets of my life, by the way.
Oh, so you did
Um,
go guilty.
I had to,
Yeah.
right? And the worst thing is, it's a bit when you're in a prison situation, and it's all right for all them people saying, "I would never do that." If you're being strip searched twice a day, and everywhere you go in the prison, you've got two dogs with you, you only ever get your door unlocked when there's two prison officers. Everywhere you go, you have a passport within the prison. It's the highest form of security ever. In the unit itself, it's like torture. They wake you up every 15 minutes to make sure you're still there, right? This is not a normal incarceration, right? This isn't someone getting done for fraud and they kick them out the door after 6 months in an open prison, right? This is people that are vindictively going after you, right?
Graham, on a personal curiosity, why? Why you? Why did they try and pin this on you?
There were a number of reasons, and again, if I told the full story of it, who they really wanted was a guy called Kenny Noy. And they said that he was a personal friend of mine, that I spent a number of hours in a hotel with eight, no less, prostitutes with Kenny Noy,
Well done.
snorting cocaine all night and drinking with eight prostitutes, right? When my wife, who had known me for many, many years, read that in the paper, all her family was like horrified, right? And she went, "That is a complete and utter lie." She said, "I know him and he would never, ever do anything like that. That's just not him, right?" And she knew me, right? So so my wife knew it was complete and utter rubbish, right? Um, but Pete, it's the way that the media construct it. For some strange reason, the public love forms of criminal enterprise, right? I don't know what it is. They've just got this fixed fate. They really want a big crime. They want to be interested in a big crime, right? Where I was like, this is complete rubbish. They've made it up from start to finish, right? So they wanted him. One of the reasons, obviously, was because he killed a police officer in self-defense, right? And bearing in mind, I don't know Kenny Knight, right? To this day, and I want to make sure the audience knows this, everything they said about me and Kenny Knight, I have never met the man, ever. Even to this day, I've never met him, right? Don't know him, don't really want to know him, right? It's as simple as that. But there were people that I was involved with that did know him, right? And the police orchestrated a sting to to capture him and his involvement with this. And I can tell everyone now, he had no involvement whatsoever, right? Even the judge said to the prosecution, "Why are the press and you bringing up a guy's name called Kenny Noy? There is absolutely no evidence that Kenny Noy was involved with this at all, right? So why are you using his name?" So some parts of it, the judge, an early judge, was like sniffing a rat. Um, so that's basically why they targeted me. And again, it's like I was a patsy. But and again, I had computer skills at the time, so I went various reasons. I went back to college. Um, I've done a 2 year BTEC. I was continuing with an ongoing degree with telecommunications, which, by the way, when I was in prison, they wouldn't allow me to do the exams or have a programmable calculator. They said I was so dangerous I couldn't even have a programmable calculator in my cell. That's how bad it was, right?
If I'd have known how dangerous you were, I wouldn't have invited you on, Graham.
Well, that's what I mean, right? And it makes me laugh that the trolls who continuously attack me, right? And I'm like, you do realise that allegedly there's two police witnesses on a full-scale police protection witness program, and you're on there attacking me as if I'm a mug, right? Yet they're still in police protective custody 30 years later, right?
Mm.
It's a joke. The whole thing is but again, it shows how corrupt the police are and the court system, which is why when people tell me stories and I look at the evidence, I'll give you an example, Lucy Letby,
Yeah.
right? Straight away, I looked at that case and said, this is wrong. There is absolutely no evidence to convict. And the judge should have thrown that out.
Yeah.
Instead of putting it to the jury, it was the judge's responsibility to say there is no evidence, right? But he didn't. And that shows that the prosecution, the defense, and the judge was all in on it. And when you have that problem, right, you're going behind the door. The state is powerful. And we have a constitution that stops that from happening, which is why I started to read and understand what the law was, what the police could do, what they couldn't do. And to be fair with you, it's got a lot worse in 30 years. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll give you another example to your audience. This often shocks people. People now understand that their phones are listening devices and the cameras on their computers. That's I said go around people's houses and they've taped over the cameras on their things, right? 30 years ago, they was listening to what was going on in my house via my skybox,
Oh, wow.
right? Via my skybox. And that come out in court. They had put listening devices in skyboxes 30 years ago. So what do you think their capabilities are now on
Yeah.
spying on the people? And people don't realise we live in Soviet Britain.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
there's lots to unpack there. As I mean, I will hopefully go back on the Sean Atwood show. But one of the greatest attributes to that prison sentence, if there could be one, was that me and my brother actually met Charlie Bronson. Shook his hand. He actually come up to us, and most people were petrified of him on the wing. And he come up and just said, "Are you the Moore brothers?" And we went, "Yeah." And he shook our hand. He said, "I love you too. Or keep doing what you're doing. I love you too." He said, "You two are clever, right?" And then, even though it was all bullshit, um, and then on the other side of it, he also assisted us with a request and a complaint. So even Charlie Bronson come on board with us at that age. You know what I mean? We was trying to say to him, "Stop the violence. This is how you do it."
Yeah. 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 What a claim to fame. Okay, so you did your 3 years, and then what happened? You were you able to continue doing your research in those 3 years when you were inside? And
Well, I carried on. So I've carried on researching, carried on reading the law, carried on reading the law reports, um, and various other things happened. So I'll give you an example. I then applied for a job with a telecommunications company. Um, Within 18 months, I've been promoted 7 times. So within 18 months of being released from prison, I was earning £80,000 a year plus bonuses. And the company I joined was a big American company. And I said, listen, I haven't got a degree, but I know what I'm doing. They put me through a 4-hour interview with their engineers and took me on and said, we're not interested in degrees. What we want people that can do the job and know what they're doing, right? We're not interested in people sitting doing degrees. So from there, I mean, giving you an example, I even done a presentation to a guy called Warren Buffett, who just happened to be one of the richest men in the world. And he invested 250 million in the company, in the telecoms company. We spent, I think it was 14 billion in 18 months building the largest dark fiber network in the world. And it's basically what the internet now works on is what we built all them years ago, and state of the art routing systems, switching systems, Juniper the highest level was Cisco, but at that time Juniper was the highest level.
Yeah.
We was involved with all of that. So from a technical point of view, that was where I got to. But the prison sentence and the way this country in particular operates, and the fact that it was all the setup from start to finish, that's never so. For example, because I've never done a degree, and they wouldn't allow it, and because I've been to prison, they would never allow me to be a solicitor or a barrister, even though because of my experience and the way I work on cases, which make every case is an individual case, right? You shouldn't have any processing of cases. So when someone starts telling you the story and you're speaking to them and you're fitting it all together, there's major stories I could tell you about what happened to a lot of the prisoners in there. Two of whom were released because of what they said to me, and then me conveying the information with their permission to my solicitor, who was a fantastic solicitor, and I had a really great barrister as well, um, and then got them people released because it's obvious they were fitted up. But because of the publicity and because of what the media had done, it's a bit like the Lucy Letby case. The state can't back down, right? And they will protect the guilty parties of the setup, and you will be the patsy, which is basically what happened with me. So, if it wasn't for that, I probably would have had a degree in technology, and then done the extra 1 year and become a barrister, and probably would have got pupillage from somewhere. But the only thing I would ever guarantee to anyone is if I'm ever working for you on your case, no one, and especially not the state, will ever get in a way between me and a client and doing the best for the client, not for the state.
Yeah. So you said you're a paralegal. What does that mean? Does that mean you just practice? Is there anything in the paralegal, or you're just practicing as a paralegal in terms
No,
of?
so I'm a registered paralegal. You can do their courses, but to be fair, there's certain elements in the paralegal courses and the exams that I completely disagree with because what they're actually teaching people is
Yeah.
unconstitutional, right?
Yeah.
And therefore I won't do them. I'll just say that that's complete nonsense. And if you want me to write something just to get your certificate, I won't do it,
Yeah.
right? So even there, the integrity gets in the way of a qualification. But even so, the only people that get audience, and again, which is wrong in common law, by the way, the legal profession have created a monopoly, and monopolies are unlawful in England. But the legal profession has created a monopoly. You can only get an audience in front of a High Court judge if you are a barrister or if you are a solicitor with audience rights. And then you have to apply for audience rights. Well, I'm not a solicitor. And all they've done is created a system where the system in law protects the system, which is completely wrong. And that's not the way our law developed. The common law didn't develop like that. The Inns of Courts, for example, none of the people or the original founders of the four Inns of Courts were barristers. They were normal everyday lay people, and they had an interest in one type of law or the other, and literally sat in an inn, an alehouse, right, and discussed law. And then all of a sudden you get different groups of people who present a case to a judge, and the judge would say, yeah, and there you got the different Inns of Court. So there was no system that restricted. And there used to be a saying in England, and I believe it was said in Hansard, that every Englishman is a common lawyer because every Englishman knew his rights. And now you couldn't get further from the truth.
No.
So that's basically where a lot of so my integrity of the law is my love of the law and my love of English rights and where it came from, the legal history. Right, I'm not interested in one king, having a relationship with his second cousin or his first cousin from another country. That's all nonsense to me. What I'm interested in is during their reigns, what laws were passed, and how that affected our common law, and that's what I really look for,
Mm.
and that's what I research. And just to make sure the audience are clear on this, I don't get anything that I say from a British law book. What I talk about in law is from the archives, right? So we are one of the only countries in the world with 1100 years of handwritten history where you can go to the archives and pull something out that's 1,000 years old, right? And you can take pictures of it. If it's in Latin, you can get it translated, right? And you'll have information from our ancestors that actually wrote it. That's the difference. And the British Soviet system is erased all that and stopped your access to it.
So is it easy to get access to that?
Relatively, if you know where to look for it, relatively easy. There are archives, and some of the best archives, funny enough, are not in this country, they're in America. And again, people don't realize, I mean, the Americans are I mean, America was founded on the English common law.
Yeah.
The American Constitution is English. Um, it's not British, English. And the more that people understand it, the more of that information is available in America than it is in this country. But there are, so I'll give you another example of one of the positives from the English Constitution Society, and there's many of us, there's hundreds of us, right? By the way, we go to law lectures. And I've sat in front, I've actually sat there and met 4 Supreme Court judges and had a glass of wine with them, cheese and biscuits, and we're talking about the law. We're not free men of the land, right? We're actually out there saying, well, what about this? And the judges like it. Right, they actually like us talking to them because they're getting interaction from the public.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not a group of people sitting in their court terrified. It's an interaction, and they seem to, appear to like it. But getting back to so for your audience, right, and this is really important. There's something called the Hamlin Lectures, right? There was a solicitor in Devon. She died. She was well into the law. Her father was a solicitor, and she created she was very wealthy. She created a trust, and in that trust was a process of lectures where the top people in their field gave a lecture to lay people. So the audience was not allowed to be solicitors or barristers. So the first lecture was called Freedom Under the Law, right? And it was Lord Denning in 1949, I believe it was, right? Fantastic lecture. Full, there it is. That's why you have freedom under the law. Now, the next lecture was all about juries. The next lecture was about, again, you've got Sir John Laws and a lecture, the common law constitution, all of these lectures every year. So one day I went to try and access them and they weren't there. Bearing in mind that it is a trust, right? And these lectures are all there, still carried on to this day. And it's for us. We are the beneficiaries of that trust. And our rights are the benefits of that trust. And the beneficiaries are the people doing the lecturing who know what their role is to tell the people what the law is, the real law, not all this idiocy that you see out there at the moment, right? So, cut a long story short, it had all been cut off. So again, myself and many of our subscribers and members of the English Constitution Society and Party wrote to the trust, right? So hundreds of emails went to the trust and said, "Where's our lectures gone?" Right? They're valuable lectures, trust me. If you want an education in law, go and read, especially pre-2005, right? So the trust come back to us and said, "We never knew this and we never realised. Thank you for telling us," right? Because it's their job to make sure it stays up. Well, it turned out that the original hosts were Exeter University and the university that had taken over the digitising and the database of the trust was Cambridge University. And Cambridge University had taken it down, right? Now they're an extreme lefty university, and so is
Yeah.
Oxford, right? So the trust then contacted Exeter University. Exeter University said, well, it's nothing to do with us, right? So the trust said, we don't care who it's to do with. Our trust says that stays in public domain, right? So they then, when made some inquiries, then they said, oh, we've put it back up. We checked, and loads of the lectures was missing, right? We said, no, it's not right yet. Went back to the trust. They thanked us again and said, without you, we wouldn't known any of this, right? Gone back, and they said, we want all of that put back the way it was. Next thing you know, everything's come back. Now you can go along. If you go to that archive, and if you clicked on just freedom under the law, for example, or juries, the jury lecture is fantastic, right? But if you click on any of them, you can download the whole PDF, print it out, read it. But it also gives you the titles because they do them in big book form as well. Unfortunately, you have to order the books from Cambridge University, but you can get it all in book form, and it's literally the top common law experts in England telling you what the law is.
How can people easily access that? Is there a website?
Yeah, so if you was to do a search for Hamlin Lectures, Exeter University, it should come up, and then on the page that it takes you to, you'll see archived. So you'll have pre-2005, post-2005. If you want to see all the early lectures, Lord Denning, common law, etc., all the really good stuff, click on a button pre-2005, and they all come up on the screen. You just click the button and download it, and
Oh,
then you can read through it, and it is a fantastic education. Anyone out there, and especially these people who say they know the law, I want so I want your audience to realise something here, right? I didn't just start this during COVID.
no.
I've been doing this a long time, right? So one of the things you might hear a few pings coming through on my computer. If you do, I apologise. One of the things that you should also realise is a lot of these people that sprung up. I've said they're Marxists for some of the things that they say. I mean, there is such a thing as illegal fiction, for example, and it's a normal thing. It's part of a corporation. Corporations have existed for over 1,000 years in England. There isn't a problem with corporations. There's a problem with the way that corporations are operated and the officers of the corporation. And again, Sir Edward Cook basically said in a case in 1612, he explained the legal fiction, right? And it's not the misconception and the misinterpretation that the Freeman and the Landers are out there with. And I'll give you an example. There was even a recent case where someone asked to borrow and this is quite legal, the legal fiction of the Attorney General, because there was a public interest case. He went to the Attorney General and they said, we haven't got time for it, but we understand that that's a public interest issue. And he wrote him out a certificate and said, use my legal fiction. So he's gone to the court and the judge said, have you got the certificate from the Attorney General to say you can use his legal fiction? And he showed it to the judge, and it went, and then the case come up as Attorney General versus, I think it was the post office unions, right? So that's what I'm trying to say to people. There are so I'll give you another example of a legal fiction. People often laugh. Is the monarchy? The king is a legal fiction, right? It was created by the law. It was created. So the real name of the King of England, not my king, by the way,
No.
the real name of the king is Charles Windsor, right? And by the way, he's changed his name previously, the family have, but his name is Charles Windsor. So in law, the king can do no wrong. Well, that is true because the king is a legal fiction, but his servants can. So that's what they say. Shit, crown servants can be prosecuted, but not the king himself, right? But if the king was standing in front of you and let's say he decided to, I don't know, I want to be careful with my language because I'm on your channel, right? Let's say he dispatched you, right? In public view, he dispatched you. Um, can the king be done for that? Of course he can, because you would then say there's no servants involved here. It's Charles Windsor, and his legal fiction doesn't protect him. So he would end up in court charged with dispatching or murder. But you've got to understand it. You can't, these people are coming out with all these weird and wonderful things, and all they're doing, especially I'm a living man, is the worst thing you can say to a judge or in a judge or in a court. Because straight away they're ticking a box, been the case. You could have all good law after that. Because you've said that, your case is not even going to be heard.
So
Right?
what do you say? Because I've been involved in a few. I've seen a few. Had my own, and there's one where you say I'm here on special appearance. Representing the legal fiction. Basically, is that wrong?
Yeah. Yeah.
What do
So,
you?
so, 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 so all you need to do is go to you. So there's a number of different issues with that, right? Representing a legal fiction, right? So all I do is ask a simple question, right? So anyone, so some people come to me, I don't know, for whatever the offence is, and they believe they've committed an offence, but they say it weren't me, it was my birth certificate, right? And I just say to them, stop being an idiot, right? That's just idiocy. And if you're going to say that to a judge, if you said that to me as a judge, I'd give you 2 years, right? A minimum of 2 years, because you to say I'm a living man to someone in front of you as a judge, that's just insulting everyone's intelligence, right? And the people who created that and have pushed it out there are Marxists. They're the ones who have created this nonsense in the background. It's almost laughable, right? But I think it's very serious. And the people creating that and pushing it out there are just idiots. And what they're doing is taking vulnerable people that don't know about the law and making them even more vulnerable. And that's the bit that angers me, because I've had people crying on the phone to me. They've lost their houses. If you start talking about council tax, for example, I completely agree. It's an unlawful tax. But the way to attack that is with a group litigation order, because the original authority that Parliament created to allow councils to charge you a council tax was unlawfully enacted. The process was unlawful because they removed the ability of the Crown to assent to it. That's illegal. It's unconstitutional. So therefore, anything it creates is unlawful, which is why when we say, if you really want to solve all the problems in this country, and this country I mean England, you need to avoid the Act of Union, because the Act of Union gives the authority to a British Parliament, and the British Parliament then created all these laws. So there's a single point of failure. You pull the rug on it, and every law since 1707 is null and void, as long as you make the Act of Union null and void. And null and void is an important legal term, not repeal. Repeal means that anything that you do, anything that it did up until the point of repeal is lawful. And then you can't use the act after that, right? Void means anything that it did is null and void. Any authority that Parliament give to anyone is null and void, right? It's the only tool, because we as the English have got a reset, and the reset is a glorious revolution. And people don't understand how important it is. And the English Bill of Rights and Declaration of Rights, and most of the people that talk against it, unfortunately, are Catholic. because one of the things that the English Bill of Rights did was protect Protestants and the Protestant religion and the Presbyterians in Scotland. So when you understand the history of it and the legal history, you understand exactly what's going on. So getting back to council tax, etc., there was a recent case, I think it was in 2023, where a judge had basically said the process was wrong. Well, and there's loads of people out there saying council tax is illegal. Well, it is illegal, but for a different reason. But that case, I can't remember what it was called
It's
now.
Bristow and Souter, isn't it?
The Suto case, right?
Yeah.
So, but what the judge is saying is it's the process that is unlawful, and I agree. But that's called an abusive process, and that's why it makes it unlawful. And that goes back to right the way back to observance of due process of 1384, right? So it's constitutional. If you're going to say something is a law and you have to do X, Y, Z, then bing to make it lawful, if you don't follow that process, it's unlawful, right? That is a completely different statement to saying council tax is unlawful. The process that the bailiffs used and the council used was unlawful and currently is unlawful. What you have to be careful of is Parliament believes it's sovereign, unlawfully, by the way. That is actually a treasonous statement to say Parliament is sovereign, because it isn't, right? And then what you do is you look at these people and you say, so what you need to do is do this, which is group litigation order, and challenge the enactment, right, of the European Local Authorities Act, or whichever one it was. I mean, I'm not massively au fait with the whole process, except the unconstitutional part of it, because that's what I concentrate on. Because what people have got to understand is if a judge says that the process that the council and the bailiffs have used is unlawful, therefore it's null and void what they've done, right? And therefore you can claim damages against them. Well, then the same standard of law is applied to the process of enacting the Local Authorities Act, because it was unconstitutional. So a judge like that would look at it and say, no, I agree. I agree, it's unlawful. So therefore it should be made null and void. And anyone being forced to pay council tax, the initial authorising law was enacted unlawfully.
So, like a lot of people listening and watching, and myself included, there are different, as you know, Graham, different things that are being taught out there. Some right, some wrong, some blurred lines, all of that kind of thing. The birth certificate is the legal fiction. That's right, okay? That's how the legal fiction is created, from the birth certificate.
So I don't get involved with any of the legal fiction nonsense, right?
Did you?
Because and the reason I say that to people, there is a legal fiction, right? All these people that go around calling themselves on. I know Joe of the family of blogs and all that. That at the end of the day, there are reasons why records of birth are kept, right? One of them is so they can plan and look at certain things. Another one is inheritance laws and tracing rights. I mean, I know people, one particular person that inherited just over £1 million because of the fact that all the births in their family was registered, and his great aunt had died and had all this money and left it to him. So, but it's not designed for what people are out there projecting this nonsense. So let me just make sure I'm clear on this, right? And I must be clear on this. Many people who went into this free man of the land nonsense, I'm a living man, all that stuff, right? The clever ones come out the other side, and then they started really looking at the law, the common law, and the constitution. I've met lots of them people, and they all say the same thing to me, right? we come through the other side. We realise that was nonsense, but what you're doing is actual real law. And I say that's all we want. But so in some ways, it's acting as a filter system, right? A bit like comprehensive schools where they shove all the working class in there, right? And then having a grammar schools. Well, there's a group of people that go into the grammar schools that can actually see it, are intelligent, and are looking at it in a different way. That's they're the people that I'm interested in. They're the people, most of the people that when I do my seminars, they're there, and all of them say the same thing. We agree.
So,
Um,
so what is the right way to do it? I go into court, I'm being charged with a bullshit liability order and all the rest of it. What am I supposed to open with in your opinion and what you believe is to be truth and fact? What do I say?
what again? How long is a bit of string? I don't know your circumstances or your and that's another thing. You can't do this. Or every case is an individual case, right? So you would be looking at what happened to get you there. If I mean, I've seen people turfed out of their houses because they said I don't contract with you, right? And I've said, oh right, are you a tenant? Yeah. A council tenant? Yeah. All right. Did you sign a lease agreement? Yeah. And that gives everyone the authority to enter your house every 5 years for an electrical test and every year for a boiler test. And because you don't contract with them, you've now breached your contract and you're putting other people at risk. And they've turfed you out after you've lived 30 years in a council house because you've listened to this nonsense, right? And I've had them crying on the phone to me. Please help me. I said, go back to the people who told you to do that. And and the YouTube people who told you to do that. And what do? They all say, oh, no, you did this wrong. It's a bit like the communists when they say communism works, and every failed country it's been in, yeah, but they didn't do it the right way. Well, there's never been a right way to do communism because communism is completely wrong in its economic model in every aspect of it, right? So it's the same thing. So when all I'm saying to you is, I can only give you examples of some of the things I've seen. So one person showed me an email that he started off this conversation with the council, and on it come out of all this spiel. And I said, why did you write all that? And I'm a living man. Um, my legal fiction will be, and then all of this stuff. And then he put something on about everything on here is copyrighted. And I said, well, why did you write that paragraph? And he said, so they couldn't use it against me in a court. I said, oh, right. I said, well, the term for that in law is without prejudice. And if you write that, right, on any email conversations, any letters, nothing else, no, I'm a living man and all that. If you just write without prejudice, if you've made any mistakes in that communication, they can't use it in court against you because that's what without prejudice means, right? So they can't use it against you. But again, it's basic law, right? And these people that project, that they know the law, and yet they don't start a simple conversation without prejudice. The amount of times I've had emails back from police officers that haven't put without prejudice on there and start all their idiocy that they put onto me, and all of them emails can be used in court against them. That's just it's as simple as that. So it depends on the process. So I want to make sure I express this to everyone, right? I completely and utterly agree that council tax is an unlawful tax, right? I completely, but I come from a different angle. What I'm saying is it's unconstitutional. It was enacted unlawfully. You've got no say in where it goes. There's another set of laws that protect you that basically state that you don't need to pay council tax if they don't declare to you where that money's going, and if there's anything, let's say part of the money goes into the climate scam, and you have got an absolute objection to it, which I have, right? You've got an absolute objection to it. You just that's all you do, and just I mean I don't. Well, I'm going to tell you anyway. I don't tell people or advocate them not paying council tax. And the reason is because what they don't tell you is if you own your own house and you owe more than £1,001, the council can make an application to court to take your house off you, right? And all these people out there never tell people that. They just say stop paying your council tax. Well, they can take your property off you. They will get a liability. Listen, the whole system. No one here is saying the system isn't corrupt. We're living in Soviet Britain. It's as corrupt as it gets. But the way to resolve it is going back to the Constitution and resetting this nation and taking out the Soviets, right? And you're not going to do it with individually standing in front of a Soviet judge, right? Because that's what they are. Soviet judges, Soviet magistrates, nodding dogs for the Soviet system. So you need to go back to the Constitution and the real common law. And it isn't done with standing there saying, I'm a living man, or this is my legal fiction. And getting back, to the king, if the king was to dispatch someone, his legal fiction is the king. He can't stand in court, right, and hold his legal fiction up and say, it wasn't me, Your Honour, it was me legal fiction. If there's witnesses that he dispatched someone, Charles Windsor, right, is the servant of the crown, and Charles Windsor will be convicted of murder.
Well, that's obviously, there's a real victim there, who's dispatched somebody. With something like non-payment of council tax, like you said, which is unlawful, it's knowing how to negotiate those courts. And, the bankruptcy they apply for if there's 5,000 or more in arrears, and then they're supposed to follow a process, and very often that process is problematic, as the judge in Bristow and Souter said. But I think you're obviously very passionate about the living man woman thing, but the way, because we're not told that, obviously, that birth certificate, the all caps name, all that sort of thing is then used and traded as bonds, etc., etc., and that's how they have corrupted the system by the use of these all caps names. Most people aren't aware of that, and then you get yourself.
Yeah, but they haven't. They haven't. That most of what you just said there, with all the greatest respect to you, is complete nonsense. If you go back to a guy called John Harris, right, who some years ago I used to watch, and used to sit there giggling, he actually made a video before he committed suicide. By the way, he made a video, and he said all of what I said there was complete nonsense. I lied to people. And now I've got people going out there committing offences and saying it's their legal fiction. And he ended up killing himself, right, because of what he had created. And that was John Harris himself. You can go and look at the video. It's still on YouTube, where John Harris, the person who started this free man of the land stuff, right, says it's nonsense. What I've told you is nonsense, right? So there are elements to contract law where things are done in a certain way, and there are specializations in law. Trust law is another one, which is highly specialized. And by the way, trust law is equity law. And then I have idiots telling me the best court in the land is an equity court. And I said, why is that? And they'll say, well, because if it's a juror. I said, well, equity courts don't have juries. The whole reason why we abandoned, not just abandoned, we made it unlawful, and it led to a civil war, was because we had an equity court called the Star Chamber, right? And the reincarnation of the Star Chamber today is the family court. Because of what they're doing and how they're doing it, it is an absolute disgrace. It's disgusting. It goes against all the principles of English law. Yet, we allow it to happen because people are being conned. We've been given the greatest tool in the world. And that tool is the English common law, the English constitution, and the internet. And it is being abused by Marxists to corrupt people's minds. And then when you stand in front of a judge and come out of all this stuff, they're just binning what you're doing. And you're creating a big problem for yourself. I was involved with a recent case. And I read some of this stuff that this lady had done. Don't forget, a legal process wrongly takes years. And some of the stuff that she wrote 3 years ago was all in this bundle. And when I looked at it, I said, oh my God, this is all free man of the land stuff. And she said, I'm not free man of the land anymore. I said, yeah, I know, but you've effed your case up because you've put that in there. That judge is going to look at that and look at you as an idiot. Even though in the last 18 months to a year of her bundle, she was bang on the money with the law, right? But the judge ain't going to get past the first 2 years. He's going to look, and I know he ain't made his judgment yet, and I know exactly what he's going to do, and he's going to rule against her. And there's a strong possibility that she's going to lose her house in costs if she carries on with the process. And it's all because of what these people have done in the background. So I'm not. Don't get me wrong. I don't want anyone. Listen, people describe me as an expert in the common law, an expert in constitution. There is no such thing as an expert in the common law, right? No such thing. The common law goes back 1,500 years, goes right the way back to the Anglo-Saxon times, right? So you cannot be an expert in it. It's impossible. And even if you had a 9-panel judges with a common law case in the Supreme Court, which is unlawful, if you had a 9-panel or even 11-panel of judges, I'll guarantee out of 11 experts, law experts, with 60 years each of experience, they'll still disagree with each other, which means what? Like, you can't have an expert. If someone's disagreeing with it, not unless you get a case where it's 11-0. And there's been recently some cases in America where that's happened. That's a very difficult precedent to get round. If you get a unanimous decision from a common law jurisdiction court where 9 or 11 judges have been unanimous that the plaintiff is wrong or the defendant is wrong. So and again, the Constitution is the nearest thing. The reason why the Constitution is so good is because the way it's worded, because it is law. It's written as a statute generally, not all the time, but generally. Otherwise, it'd be part of the convention. And people should remember that a charter is a statute, right? And again, Freemen of the Land come out with so much nonsense about statutes are not law. Statutes are law. The original charters were the earliest form of statute. And then when they transferred to Westminster in 1275, right, which is the first statute of Westminster, and when they created it, what they did was they expanded the franchise of Parliament. So more people got involved with the decision making on law. Prior to that, it was the King in council. Well, Parliament is the King in council. It's the same thing, right? But it's just the franchise is expanded. And again, it's only if you really research legal history, and I'm talking about legal history, you'll start to understand it. I sort of get, and again, I don't want anyone to think I'm not an expert in terms of, I'm not sort of an AI robot that anything you ask, I can beam straight at you. The difference with me is, and Lord Denning actually said this, you win cases from your chambers, not standing up in a court of law. So the more work and research you put in, there are legal databases that you can research and find the type of defences and legal arguments that help you win your case, which I know that your barristers or your solicitors won't even bother. They're just a tick box because You've got administrative law shoving you through a system, which, by the way, is an unlawful type of law in this country.
Do you
Uh, uh,
challenge the jurisdiction of the court when you go in?
Can you?
Or do, no, I know you can, but do you? Is that an approach you would do?
Well, not unless I'm in. So the only time I would challenge the jurisdiction of the court is if there was something happening in the background. So I'll give you the easiest thing to explain is if I don't know if the police tried to charge me with something and it was a criminal law, right? And I ended up in a chancery court, which is an equity court. I would most obviously say it's not in your jurisdiction, and the judge would probably laugh and agree because it's a complete different jurisdiction. But again, it's what people are doing in the background. Most of that, what they're talking about, unless there's other types of jurisdiction. I'm trying to think of someone that's fairly obvious. For example, if the police, if the British Transport Police, right, was to come and arrest you for something, and it's got nothing to do with the railways, it's got nothing to do with the railway stations, it's got nothing to do with their jurisdiction, and they come and arrest you for something, I would challenge their jurisdiction to do that, to even make the arrest. But apart from that, that a lot of the jurisdiction stuff that they come out with. So I've got to make sure I put that. It's really difficult when you're trying to explain this to people. I'm not suggesting that every statute that's covering that creates law, right? I'm not suggesting to you that every one of them is absolutely bang on, but they should never have been enacted into law if it challenges your constitutional rights. But the process of lawmaking is now administrative when it shouldn't be. So the whole administrative law thing is unlawful in this country, and the way that Parliament is acting and what it does. Parliament is not sovereign. It's obvious it's not sovereign. If you go through the process of it, so I'll just explain this to you because I think it's probably quite important. There is a separation of powers, right? David Starkey says there isn't, and English law have never had that. David Starkey is talking out of his backside, right? He is a typical middle class idiot, right? A professor of history that doesn't know the legal history of this country. If he did, he wouldn't say it, right? He wouldn't have said it. America got the separation of powers from us, the English, right? Not the British, the English. There is a process of making law, and part of that process, without going right the way through the process, part of that process is that the monarch must assent to the law for it to become enacted and therefore be law, right? The monarchy can not assent to it, in which case it is not law, right? That's where the separation of powers comes in. So the monarchy says, I'm not assenting to that law. Last time it happened in this country was Queen Anne, right? The point I'm trying to make to you is that power still exists and that prerogative still exists. So at any time, if King Charles stood in and said, I'm not going to allow that, I'm not assenting to that. I'm stepping in to say I'm not having it, right? And he's protecting us, the subjects of the realm, right? Because he's got a contract with us. The other element to that is that at any time, if an enactment takes place, so let's say the monarch's made a mistake, Parliament's made a mistake, they've enacted something that goes against. Let me see if I can kill this email. They create a law that goes against our rights in some way. Coronavirus laws, for example, right? and then you take it to the High Court. That's if the High Court isn't corrupt, which it is, right? So we're living in Soviet Britain, right? They're all nodding dogs. The High Court has the ability to nullify, void, for repugnancy or going against justice and right, yeah, any enactment of Parliament, whether it be primary, secondary, or any other form of law, statutory instruments, any of it, right? They can nullify any of it. And it's an absolute nonsense for people out there to say, no, they can't do that. Yeah, they can do that. And again, it was Sir Edward Coke in the Dr. Bonham case of 1610 that said that the common law will control statute if it is against justice and right. He also said if it goes against the Magna Carta. Now, Magna Carta wasn't used for 200 years until they started playing up, right? So the ruling classes, whatever you want to describe them as, started playing up. And it was Sir Edward Coke that went, we're not having it. And he started talking about the Magna Carta. Well, we've now got additional elements, not just the Magna Carta. We've got a common law constitution. So they kept adding to our rights. And that's the thing that people need to know, that the constitutional part of this is what saves you. But what these people are doing in the background, the Freemen and the land stuff, all the nonsense that comes out, they're actually destroying your knowledge and your ability to present as a common lawyer your own case, because you're not getting to the truth of the actual where it come from, what it is, and what they're allowed to do. And let me tell you this: there's judges out there that are on our side. They're not all bad, right?
Where are they, Graham?
Sorry?
Where are they?
No, they do. They do. I'm not saying there's many of them, but they do. But they do exist, right? There was a particular case. If you want me to tell you about this case, because it was actually, well, it wasn't funny for me, but it wasn't funny for the victim. There was one of our guys that got arrested at a protest, right? And it was to do with immigration. The police arrested him, bent him up, handcuffed him, and he basically told the police officer to F off, right? The police then arrested him for a public order offence. They kept him in custody for 3 days. Didn't allow him to sort out his animals, his dogs, right? So these dogs had no food or water for 3 days. This is what the police done to him, right? Then he spoke to me about the case, and I said, did they arrest you? And he went, yeah. And then he showed me all the video evidence of exactly what went on. It was all. This is why it's so important that you have someone that always there at protests, right? And you must never interfere either side, right? But we've got high vises with legal observer written on it and legal observer at the back, right? And you video what the police are doing and what the demonstrators are doing. And the High Court accepts that you are then an independent professional witness, right? It's really important. So you're standing back observing what the police are doing. So cut a long story short, it gets to court, and we put a case stated in, because a magistrate isn't a court of record, right? So the only way you can get it on record is to do it as a case stated. And they brought some process in that you have to do it within so much, that you've got a time limit on this, time limit on that. They make it everything as difficult as possible for you, right? But this was all done perfectly, mainly because I was helping him, right? And that's not blowing my own trumpet. It's just I've done it a few times before, so I went bang, bang, bang. That's what it is, right? And I wrote out the law, and it turns out, so we've put this in to the CPS, and the police have all turned up to give evidence against this fella. Magistrate sitting there listening, you know, with a big slapped ass face, right? And the basis of it was the High Court had already said that telling a police officer to F off is not a public order offence, right? And here's the worst bit. This is the bit that I showed them, right? That it was not an arrestable offence. So it's an unlawful arrest, right? So we've gone all through the law, laid it all out, and then put the high courts and the precedent set by the one of them was, I think his name was Judge Busby or something. It's got a funny name, the judge. But the judge was getting the ump in the high court. He said, "Why are the police arresting people for swearing at them?" And what the judge said was, "It may be immoral to swear in public, but it is not illegal, right? It's not unlawful. It's not against the law to swear in public,
Yeah.
right?" And so we won the case. So we've put in a claim. So, by the way, the magistrate read through everything I read. The clerk of the court, they call them something else now, basically looked all through it. The CPS looked embarrassed. The police was there. They run out red-faced because they had basically unlawfully arrested someone and used violence against him, right? And kept him in custody for 3 days. And then the applicant or the defendant said, "Well, I need paying for time off work for all the time I've been coming here, and also I want to pay my litigation, a Mackenzie friend." And then the judge said, "How much is that?" And he said £1,800, and then put the bill in. And the magistrate signed it off and said, "No, I agree. That's a reasonable cost." Guess what happened? They refused to pay me. The government refused to pay me because they said, "You're not a lawyer." I said, "I'm a paralegal." They said, "We're not paying you. You're not a lawyer. You're not a solicitor. We're not paying you." Right? So everything I do, I give really my time and effort. And again, the amount of effort that goes in, just that sounds like a small thing to people, but it's not when you're the victim.
Yeah.
Right? You want someone who's going to stand there and walk out. I mean, the guy was massively relieved,
Yeah.
right? Because any conviction like that, there was another one in Leeds Crown Court, which was an appeal, which happened to a lady, and I told her, "Sack your solicitor and sack your barrister. And if you want me to do your appeal, I'll do your appeal." And she did. She trusted me. She'd never met me at that time, right? I went all the way to Leeds, stayed in an hotel, wrote out a full appeal, right? A senior circuit court judge and 2 magistrates read through it all. There's more. There's a lot more to this case, by the way, but the basis of it was he quashed her conviction, and she burst out crying because the conviction itself was for violence, and it was a nonsense from start to finish. The whole thing was a lie, right? I got it moved from Liverpool to Leeds because the Liverpool mob, the Crown, the police were all crooked,
Yeah.
right? And then when it got put in front of a Leeds judge, right, he agreed. He said, "This is disgusting what's happened to this lady." And he ripped into them and he quashed her conviction and just said, like, there's no stain on. She lost her job. She was caring for children and she had violence on her. She lost her job like that.
Mm.
At least these people don't care,
No.
right?
Don't.
They're just animals. And then you'll get someone like me. The problem that I have is so many people ask me for help. I can't help everyone.
Yeah.
So I stick to strategic, constitutional stuff. If I was to say to anything to your audience at all, it would be scrub your mind of the bullshit of free man of the land, legal fiction, and all that nonsense, right? At least do a basic course yourself, right? Even the basic course on contract law, if you're going to start arguing process, right? And then look at the key things that you're looking at. Abuse of process is also a tool. People don't know that, right? So in other words, if it is found, so let's say in a case that you're talking about, it turns out that the council are wrong, and they have the judge throws it out and says they haven't observed due process, blah blah blah. So it's an unlawful this, unlawful that, and he puts that in writing and gives it to you. You can then sue the council for abuse of process as a tort.
Yeah.
Right? And most people don't know that. And you could end up, depending on the case, you can end up with millions.
Right.
But again, it's getting people to believe, listen, to your audience and everyone out there, right? I haven't come here to lie to you. I'm not interested in bullshitting you. You may like what these people are saying, right? I mean, the geezer could be sitting at the end of this table and saying, Graham, I love what you're doing. I'm going to give you £20,000 a week just to talk to me, right? Sounds lovely, doesn't it? Of course I'm going to accept that, right? But it's bullshit, right? It's obvious. If something sounds too good to be true, or people sound clever when they're doing it, right? But they're not. They're actually conning you. And you're the ones like sheep going over the, and I know other people who have done this, they're guiding people like sheep over the edge of the cliff and they stand back. They're never the ones standing next to you in a court.
Hmm.
They're not the ones helping you. And you're the one who's going to go through all the stress of this, right? And in the end, you're going to lose because you listen to bullshitters. So I'm not disrespecting the people who have gone through it and come out the other side, right? Because there's maybe a few hundred, and that's all you need, right? The thousands of people that listen to that nonsense, there's a few hundred that have come through it that are intelligent, that can read law, can understand the precedents, can understand everything that's going on, can get their head around process, right? They're the ones that you should be interested in. I mean, there's only one group I know at the moment that have been really, and it's only one person. I think his name's Daniel, and that's from a channel called Sovereign Empowerment. He's the only guy that I've seen actually that knows the law. I mean, we send each other stuff as well, and then I'll look, and then I'll send him stuff, and he goes, "Wow," and then we'll sit there having a chat, and that's how the original Windsor courts started, and that's what you've got to create, but move away from the nonsense because you're being guided by people. I mean, I actually know someone that goes around telling people not to pay his council tax. He lives in £1 million house, right? Don't pay your council tax and all that. And we was at an event once, and I said, "So you don't pay your council tax?" He went, "No." I said, "Is anyone in your house?" And he went, "Yeah, my wife pays it." But he doesn't tell anyone that.
Well,
That's the only reason they haven't come for him. But he's a big voice. He's a big voice in this movement. But he
really?
never tells anybody. He never tells anyone. He
Oh, come
lives in
on,
a big.
Graham. Who is it? Who is it?
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't
Um,
tell you who it is. But But I am 100%. If he's listening to this, he will know who I'm talking. I'll probably get a text message for him.
right.
But in my opinion, he is conning people by not telling people. He says, "I don't pay council tax," right? Um, and then his wife pays it.
Yeah. Yeah. Naughty. Okay. Well, I'm just conscious of the time. So, what I didn't mention at the beginning is you're about to, well, you're running for Runcorn and Helsby in Cheshire as an MP. You are a prospective parliamentary candidate. So obviously the voting is coming up very, very soon. Um, just quickly, why should people vote for you, Graham?
Well, the main reason is you get a whole team of us of English constitutionalists. So when you get an MP, the MP is there to air your grievances against the Crown and Parliament, right? Or to the Crown and Parliament. That's the sole duty and job of a member of Parliament, not to represent a political party. So our political party, although it is registered with the Electoral Commission, England is the brand, and the manifesto is the English Constitution, right? And the Electoral Commission tried to stop us from registering because they went, "No, you've got to have policies and all that." I said, "No, no, 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 no. We're about people's rights, right?" And so the main thing is that if when they elect me, one, they'll get someone that is not frightened of the state. I will use parliamentary privilege to its maximum. And I will tell you now, everything to do with COVID, everything to do with the Ukraine war, everything to do with what these people have done to us and the frauds that they have committed against us, including on immigration, Serco, Mears Group, Clear Springs, and all of the others involved with that. Everything that they're doing, when people bring it to me, we would look through it and push it out there, and I will stand up and tell them people exactly what's going on in that court, and the world would see it. That's the difference. So we're also about local issues, and there's big local issues there. They're about to install a carbon capture device, right, which costs millions, and it's a complete and utter nonsense, right? They're about to install an incinerator. They've got tolls on the bridges there, the Runcorn Bridge, etc. And by the way, most of this stuff that I'm talking to you about now is being run by a Spanish company. So the money is being taken out of England, taken off of you tax-wise, and put into Spain, a socialist nation, right? So what you get is someone locally that knows the law. I'm not living up north, but I spend a lot of time up here. I prefer it in the north of England. My family originally come from the north, right? And you get literally this. Let me put it this way: if you want to see a maiden speech on par with Cromwell's, then elect me, and I'm guaranteeing you that's exactly what I'll do, and I will tell them what a corrupt system and a Soviet system that they have become. And all we need, by the way, people should also know this, is very quickly, there isn't a single English MP in that parliament. And people don't realise you've got Scottish MPs, Welsh MPs, Northern Irish MPs, and the rest are British. And there is a difference between British and English, right? And there are no English MPs. I will be the first English MP elected for somewhere in the region of 70 years.
Okay, well, that's reason enough. The white male has been marginalized, it would seem, over these last few years. Okay, and how can people, if people want to know more about you or want to know how to vote for you, etc., where's the best place for them to go?
I do a show every night, and I've done for about 12 years now. I've been banned on Facebook, banned on YouTube, banned on. I even got banned recently on Twitter. Funny enough, but I'm on Twitter as English Exit, right? So that's an easy one to remember. English Exit. So exit the union. You don't need a political union. The second thing is they can go to a place called Rumble. And if you put a search in there for either the Daddy Jack Dragon channel or the Full English Show. So think of the Full English Breakfast and then the show, but we're not about the breakfast. We're about everything England and the law. And I'm on there every single night, Monday through to Friday. And I've been for, like I say, about 12 years, every single night. It's completely taken over my life.
Yeah.
But it takes dedication to it and have conviction in what you believe. And again, to your audience, I've been doing this for a very long time. I've got a lot of experience of what the state can and can't do. I've read law for a very, very long time. So I'm asking you just to trust me on this. When people start doing all this free man land stuff, get away from it, learn the real law. We do English constitutional seminars all over the country, right? And we ask for donations, that's all, right? So normally we get 100, 150 people there, and then you've got me for 6 hours going through the law. And you can, and then often, so the actual seminar, and it's very difficult to get through it in 2 hours, but most of it is questions and answers. And then people are coming at me with different things, and I'll answer them and bring stuff up. Some of the things they ask me, I'll switch the camera. I'll say, listen, if you want me to answer it, I'll answer it, but I have to switch the camera off for that one. And they go, yeah, go on, then tell us what it is. And then I'll switch the camera off and just tell them the way it is. So again, I'm on your side. I'm someone who has been persecuted by the state in the past, right? And been on the wrong end of their justice system. And I'm still here fighting against their injustice in their system. So if there's anyone that you really want on your side, it's people who have been there, seen it, and done it, and are not frightened of the state. Like too many people are frightened of the
Yeah.
state.
Yeah.
So you just have to keep doing it. So again, you've got the English Constitution Society.co.uk, and then you've got the political party, which is completely separate. So the English Constitution Society is about education of the law, on the law and the Constitution. And then the English Constitution Party is basically, we've got no whips. So if you want to stand and you want the brand as England and the Constitution, and as long as you are constitutional, so you understand the basics. So I'm not asking anyone to know what I know. But as long as you understand the basics, then we would just say, yeah, you can stand. And then I nominate you. And you would create your own group of people in your area. And it can be either council elections or parliamentary elections.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, I wish you all the best with that. Graham, there's so much more I could have interjected on, asked. There's like, God, there's a million things. So maybe if you're up for it, we'll get you back on again in the future. Thank you very much. I know you've got, as I said at the beginning, you're a very busy boy, so I appreciate your time. And I know the viewers and the listeners are going to get a lot of value from this. So thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you.